Listen to the people of Flint. He's meeting with some Flint families right now. We met with the response team earlier. But really, his presence here is bringing the moral authority of the presidency of the United States to this question, which adds a great deal to our effort to not let the Flint crisis fade away. As you might recall, a few months ago, and when there was a lot of attention, a lot of people in Flint especially were concerned that this would be the one moment that Flint was in the spotlight, and before we got the help we needed, the attention would go away. President Barack Obama is making sure that that does not happen, and that's really, I think, the most significant aspect of his presence with us here today.
But you could also see it as a few months ago, the president and everyone else knew about this problem, and in January, he visited Detroit, called the Flint water crisis a terrible tragedy, and yet it takes 3 more months for him to actually show up in town. Why wait till now? What took so long?
Well, what showed up in town before he was able to get here was direct relief that he sent. Within days of being asked to declare an emergency, he did. Within a few days, his cabinet secretaries began to look at what they could do within their own budgets to help this city, and tens of millions of dollars have appeared. So, he knows that the most significant thing he can do as president is not just be here, but make sure that the federal government that he leads is here. That's more important. The fact that he's here obviously is critical, but it's not as if he waited for this opportunity to get to work on helping to solve this problem. And that you can't say that about every public official associated with this crisis. The governor of the state of Michigan.
I'm sorry, let's look at some
pictures. I was just going to say, the governor of the state of...
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, the governor of the state of Michigan, who was here, that was actually fairly remarkable. You may have seen the response he got, has continued to treat this like a public relations problem. This is a real crisis. We need help. The president delivered help, and now he's come here in person to say that he's not going to stop.
Well, Congressman, we have some pictures of President Obama just coming in. He drank some of the water, which obviously is a show to show people that the water's better than it was before. But as we look at those pictures, I want to ask about the money, because you mentioned the money. The Senate worked out a deal a month ago to provide $100 million in grant money and loans to Flint, but it hasn't passed, as you know. It hasn't worked its way through the Senate and become law. So is the federal government really going to be able to help? Because Michigan, the state has said, the governor has said, there aren't enough resources. You've said it'll cost over $1 billion to fix all those pipes.
But there's clearly not enough resources. And of course, what the president's been able to do is within the confines of the budget and his current authorization. Congress does need to act. The Families of Flint Act, which I introduced, would be $1.5 billion, equally divided between the state government and the federal government, even though we know the state government is principally responsible. What we have in the Senate would be a few $100 million to work on health and on infrastructure. So what we have, though, are people who are blocking this relief. Perhaps the president's presence in Flint, continuing to elevate this case, will make it more difficult for those who choose to stand in the way of help. But we're not going to give up. There's no way the people in Flint or anybody who represents this state is going to give up. And knowing that we have the president's back certainly strengthens our efforts.